Welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm Jay Amer, and glad to have you in our virtual studio here on your TV. We've got a show with two guests today. I'm really delighted to welcome two of our long-serving city councillors in the city of Peterborough, Keith Riel from Ashburnham Ward, Ward 4, and Dean Pappas, the councillor, one of the councillors from downtown, the town ward, Ward 3, and it's expanded, of course, beyond the downtown recently. Gentlemen, great to have you on the show. Lots is happening in Peterborough, and lots is not happening, I guess I should say. Really glad to have you both on the show and talk a bit about how you're experiencing this whole COVID-19 and what things are happening as the city starts sort of coming back to life somewhat as we're going on air. Keith, I want to start with you, and the reason I want to start with you, Keith, you have several portfolios and committees. Now, portfolios that you chair: arts, culture, and heritage, social services, seniors, and housing. And every one of those has been heavily impacted by the COVID crisis and the basic shutdown we've had over the last several months. Keith, what have you been able to do to keep in touch with those communities? And let's start with arts, culture, and heritage. We had some folks from that sector on last week. What's happening from the city's perspective?
Certainly, we've started a task force, and certainly we've reached out to the arts, culture, and heritage, and Councillor Pappas has taken the lead on that. I'm kind of the lead of the three, which is economics, environment, and social, which encompasses the social services part, arts, culture, and heritage, and arenas, parks, and rec. So Councillor Purnell in my group has taken arenas, parks, and rec because she's chair of that. So we have been reaching out to certainly the arts community and listening to them and hearing what they have to say. And I think we've had a very warm reception. They're glad that City Council has engaged them. We have made no promises financially, but we're listening to the dire straits that they're in, and certainly doing whatever we can to try and facilitate and help them out through this COVID-19.
So Dean, you're a downtown business owner. You actually support musicians at Pappas Billiards when you're open. What has been your experience being a downtown business person that's involved in that venue?
Sure, and just to pick up on a bit what Keith said too, we've had a number of these team and Zoom meetings with the cultural sector, and they've been well received. But they are going through some significantly hard times, and because they base their kind of economic part on large gatherings, right? If you have a headliner at Showplace, it's $10,000 to get the headliner in. You need 600 seats, and they won't be able to do that for the foreseeable future. Same with Market Hall, and same with a lot of these bigger venues, and that translates to the bars and the restaurants in the kind of downtown. You kind of base your whole business model on a certain number of people in your business per hour, right? If you need to make X number of dollars that day to carry your costs and pay your staff and pay your musicians, you need X number of people to be able to gather in your store. And now we're still under the 5 people rule, and bars and restaurants are still closed by order of the province. So a lot of businesses are going to be in dire straits as we go forward here. And as far as the music sector goes, I've been trying to stay in contact with the musicians who regularly come into the billiards and play and see how they're doing. Most of them have some other form of employment, but those two have been sort of dried up. So hit that sector hard.
Yeah, and quite often you see folks that are in that industry that do have day jobs, and I know one of our guests last time mentioned that. And again, I just wanted to close the loop on that sector. Keith, the other sector you're involved with is seniors. There's been a lot of discussion at the provincial level, some horror stories about long-term care homes. Peterborough's heavily involved with Fairhaven and does some funding with others. Keith, what's your experience with seniors? I mean, the provincial government, the federal government's provided some one-time payments and some funding. What can the city do in that portfolio? Because we have a very high senior population in the community. Obviously, one of the at-risk populations. The older you get, the more opportunity you would have to be exposed to this pandemic. So, What can the city do for to support our seniors, and what is happening on that front?
Every Tuesday at 8:30, we have a conference call or teleconference, and there's probably about 30 or 40 of us meet every Tuesday to go over what's happening in the seniors scene in the city of Peterborough. And these are agencies, these are like community care, some of the providers for home care, Trent, Sir Sanford Fleming, all of the aspects of that, and certainly part of it, one of my portfolios is Age-Friendly Peterborough. So certainly we meet every week and we keep up to date on what's going on both federally and provincially, and what is happening in the city of Peterborough and what's happening in them, and they being we thrash around best practices and what we can do. On the other portfolio, I'm the chair of Fairhaven, the board, the COM there, and certainly what's happening with the long-term care. And I want to preface this right now. You need to start using the word for-profit long-term care homes. 85% of the deaths have been in for-profit long-term retirement or nursing homes, not in long-term care that are public owned, like the city one here in Fairhaven. And certainly kudos to our executive director and the senior staff, and touch wood that we have not had one case of COVID-19 and have taken all the precautions since the start of March to ensure that that doesn't happen. What's happening in certainly Ontario and the long-term care facility is certainly, I've tried to highlight it since the 10 years that I've sat on the board, and certainly with both the Liberal government and this Conservative government, and nothing is happening. And now you're seeing this come to fruition of what's happening. And I keep saying, and certainly with the MPP, Dave Smith, about the vulnerable population here and all I've seen is cuts to the long-term care. So when they, yesterday, when the Premier says this has been a systemic problem and it's been dropped in our lap by the Liberal government, they've had 2 years to try and clean up this mess. And certainly I've availed myself, certainly at AMO, to talk to Minister Fullerton about this. And certainly nothing has come, and I've had several meetings with Dave Smith on this issue. So certainly they are well aware of what's going on. This has been a historic problem for years, and they've done absolutely nothing. So for them to, I guess I should preface too, that there's a difference between a commission and an inquiry. We had an inquiry into Walkerton that brought things forward to change the drinking water and everything. That's what we need. We need an inquiry, not a commission. There's a difference between a commission and inquiry. We need an inquiry into long-term care, both provincially and federally.
Keith, population. You make some excellent points there, and I know at the provincial level there is a discussion about inquiry versus commission, and the Premier's take on that is the commission could act more quickly, and obviously the whole issue has been raised, and whether you're someone that's looking at that stage of your life, or you're looking after someone in long-term care, it's critically important. I think the box has been opened to give a view, because it just doesn't make sense that there's some homes that are faring fairly well given the situation, and some that are really seeing some suffering. We should mention, you mentioned for-profit, non-profit, there's issues there, but there are some well-run for-profit companies, some local ones in fact, that but if they mirror what's happening in the not-for-profits, you'll see that and look around Peterborough, and I'll say Aon, for example, have some long-term care homes. There have been long-term investors and landlords in the city of Peterborough, and again, their homes have not had cases. They have retirement and a couple of long-term care homes as well in the region. So I think it's important to bring this issue up, and it's so important to raise awareness. These shouldn't be, in my opinion, and I think in yours and most people's, money-making profit centers. Free enterprise is great, but when you're talking about human beings and people want to see the best care possible. And Dean, we just have a couple of minutes before our break here. I want your take on that, and your experience, and what your thoughts on the seniors portfolio and long-term care in Peterborough.
Well, and yeah, and I don't often give other politicians some kudos, but I know that Keith Riel really knows everything there is to know about that portfolio, and he's deeply invested in it. So I always defer to his lead on that. He's our point guy. And I mean, he really cares about that sector, and he's involved heavily. So I usually follow Keith's lead on that because of his leadership there. So, but it is, you know, our most vulnerable community. And think about people who've, you know, you've lived in the community your whole life, you've raised your family, you've paid your taxes, and you just want to kind of be comfortable in your senior years. And here you have to deal with this very deadly virus. People are dying. It's a very serious thing that we have to deal with here. So it is an issue, and I think the province really needs to step up and change the rules around who can work and working in multiple facilities and all that stuff. I really think it needs to be looked at.
Yeah, and I think things are obviously going to be looked at with a different lens these days. And Dean, just before we go to break, Dean, the Peterborough, I call it the County City Health Unit, but it is Peterborough Public Health, I believe. Your experience working and communicating with that organization, how has that been over the last several months?
I think it's been fine. They've been under an amazing amount of stress, I would think, at this point, dealing with testing and getting all of the nurses and seniors tested. And now today we just heard they're expanding to get more into the contact tracing. So to get everybody in the community tested, I think is of vital importance as we fight this disease. We need to know who has it, who doesn't have it, and if you do get it, when did you get it? All that contact tracing has to be done. So I think they're under tremendous pressure to get that done, and it's vital if we're going to beat this kind of killer to actually everybody should go out there and get it done.
Well, it is all about communications, and sort of, you know, I appreciate you guys being here and helping us do our part in the first half of this show. And
wear your mask. So tell people, wear a mask.
Yeah, your TV has been updates and broadcast the Peterborough Public Health updates, and as we transition to trying to get things back to normal, which well, whatever the new normal might be. But I think we're going to take a break here. We got through 2 topics. We have a list of 10. That usually happens on the show. I want to come back. When we come back from the break, I do want to talk about housing. I do want to talk about finance, Dean. That's your portfolio and the impact on the community, and some of the other issues of the day, including, and I won't list everything I want to talk about. We may not get to it, but we have lots to talk about. We're here with Dean Pappas and Keith Riel, 2 long-serving, over 10 years for Dean, just about 10 years for Keith on Peterborough City Council. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back here on Politically Speaking. So stay with us. Thanks for staying with us, and welcome back to Politically Speaking. We have Keith Riel and Dean Pappas in our virtual studio here on Zoom, on your TV, and we're talking about what's happening from the city's perspective, the city of Peterborough. Before we talk about the impacts on council's operations and some other items, I wanted to touch on housing. We have had a housing crisis before this situation. Obviously, construction and various things have been on hold. There has been some construction. There's a recent notification that the city's invested in the old RCMP property on Clonsilla, and it's proceeding, and that was an affordable housing project. So Keith, I'll start with you as the housing co-chair, along with Henry Clark. That's a new portfolio. Another one that added to your list. I should mention, Keith, you outrank every other councillor. You're chair of 4. Now, you have to take away from Dean, who's only on 1, but I
sit on 11 boards.
11 boards. So Keith, tell us about the housing situation briefly, and I'll get Dean to weigh in on that as well as a downtown property owner.
The supportive housing on Clonsilla will open on, I think, the 1st of June. That'll be 6 to 8 people that we'll put in there. Certainly the most marginalized or people that are homeless. We're putting in there, and certainly the one hot on the heels of that will be the one on Sherbrooke Street that'll be coming online. I also said on Peterborough Housing, and certainly Peterborough Housing is looking at 8 properties they have, and these were probably built in the 60s and 70s, and these are geared to income housing. You see them all over the city. And we think that we can take those properties one at a time, dismantle them or tear them down and build high-rise buildings. We can put 700 to 900 units in a very short period of time with those properties. And certainly that's what Peterborough Housing is looking at. So when Marion Monsef, made the announcement of 2,000 homes, we could almost put half of those 1,000 units that you talked about, certainly through Peterborough Housing, and certainly staff is looking at that as kind of a separate company or a separate division, and certainly a corporation, I guess. And certainly this would bode well, certainly for the city on geared to income and rental units. So the property is not being used to the full extent it can, and we think if we can build high and some green space in that, that certainly we could alleviate some of the problems in the city of Peterborough on the housing side.
Well, thanks, Keith. It looks like there is some progress there, and I'm glad you mentioned that issue of the 2,000 houses that Miriam Monsef has mentioned came up, and to see that there's some progress being made there, and the city can contribute to that and it brings some of that to reality is encouraging. Dean, you're a downtown landlord, I think. You've got a property there. You've been there your whole life. Your family's been there over 100 years. A lot of housing above stores and some new developments happening downtown Peterborough. What's your perspective on the project? I guess the Y one would be closest to you, and it looks like some things are happening there at the old YMCA building.
Well, I'm actually pretty excited to see that that sort of crane looming over George Street every day, moving up the bricks and getting that building going. Because housing, you know, I've said this many times, housing, especially within a couple of blocks of George Street, is the only thing that will save our downtown at this point. We need people to live in and around our central area, because that's where they're going to shop, that's where they're going to eat, that's where they're going to take their strolls and have a coffee and all of that sort of thing, because it's more convenient for them, right? You know, and when you look at people who market in the downtown, you can see that by their marketing, right? They don't market way out in the suburbs. They market to the central area because that's where the market is. So intensification in that market will improve our downtown a lot. It's the biggest thing we can do. We've lost PCVS, St. Peter's, Baskin and Robbins, you know, and the list goes on, right? We have Central School, you know, the YMCA moved out. So, I mean, there's lots of institutions, and those are about 5,000 jobs and people that got shuffled out of the downtown. And from the time of Trail College closing until now, it's been a big number of jobs and people have moved out of the downtown. So we need to counteract that by housing. So not only is housing providing places for people to live, there's a social as well as an economic benefit to having that housing go on our downtown. So you give people a place to live, and conversely, you help the health of our downtown with that.
Yeah, Dean, those are excellent points. And I should mention, Leo Gork would hold the stick to the fire. Trail has been revitalized up at the north end of the town, and it is a graduate school, so there is some activity happening up around there. And
they are looking for another residence for that area.
Yeah, so which is sort of some regrowth. I'm going to start with Keith on the finances. Dean, you're the finance chair, but I'm going to let Keith talk about it first. We saw at a recent council meeting, there's a 6.9 million potential loss in revenues and costs that are going to be directly related to the pandemic. I'm going to get Keith's perspective on that and what that means for the average citizen, for the average ratepayer. I mean, all these programs out there, folks, we're paying for them sometime. We've paid for them in the past, we'll be paying for them in the future. I think it's really important that we get that perspective down. And that's why we have governments. You know, you need help at a certain time, you get that help, but it's sooner or later, one way or the other, we've got to get the coffers topped back up. But Keith, give us your thoughts from your perspective on the potential $7 million.
Well, certainly if we, you know, certainly I know that businesses want to get back in business. You know, I want them to be careful about COVID-19 and doing it too quick. But I mean, certainly for the first 3 or 4 months, we're $7 million in the ditch here. And certainly how are we going to make up that shortfalls? I know that Councillor Pappas that's on with us, I mean, he's the chair of finance and senior admin has looked at this here, but I mean, certainly don't have any appetite of going back to the taxpayer and increasing their taxes. You got people that are not working, you've got people that are in hardship right now. So we have to find a way, and I know Dean will talk about it, where we've gone in to look at reserves. We talked about busing the other night. If we don't get both the schools, Trenton and Sir Sanford Fleming, which are $2 or $3 million in there's a cost to that. And we absolutely need help from both the federal and provincial government on this here. We have the facility out at the wellness center where we have the homeless and the marginalized out there. We've ate into $1.1 million already. And we've asked the provincial government for $2 to $3 million to keep that going. If the gym industry goes back, the wellness center has to open as that facility. So we're in the process of looking for another place to put these people because COVID-19 hasn't gone away. We can't go back to where we were before. We have to have a facility where we can triage people, keep them safely apart the 6 meters or 6 feet. And certainly, and also we have to have an area just in case there is an outbreak. So we're in the throes right now of looking for another place that if the wellness center is open, we have to have some place to go. So these are all costs, and I think you alluded to the fact that there's only one taxpayer, whether it's federal, provincial, or municipal. And certainly it's going to be quite a debate this time around. It's probably going to be the toughest budget that I've ever gone through, or any of us will ever go through, certainly with COVID-19, certainly, and struggling.
Well, and Dean, you thought you're just going to have an easy ride, and you wanted that finance chair position, and your job.
I never thought it'd be easy.
No,
I never thought it'd be.
But Dean, so I do know you have $50-60 million in your back pocket from the PDI sale. That deal's gone through.
Well, here's what, and Keith alluded to it, and I've been talking about it quite kind of openly, that we have a number of reserve accounts, and council is going to need to look very carefully at which reserve accounts it can kind of dip into, because I don't have an appetite to go to the taxpayer either. I mean, we can't carry a deficit. That's provincial law. So that $7 million is going to need to be made up. So that means we either raise taxes or we look for another way to finance it. So one of the ideas that, I've been working with senior admin on is that, and council will have to go through all the reserve accounts. That's going to happen in June, and see which projects it wants to delay. So if we take the 6.9 or 7 million out of the reserves, now that will delay some projects and some growth. But I was thinking that if we invest the PDI money somehow, I know that you put your ideas in there, but somehow we invest the PDI money, and if the return is $2 to $3 million a year, we would use that $2 to $3 million a year to top up those reserve accounts. So that's income that we don't already enjoy as the city from investment of the PDI money. That money could then be used to top up the reserves. So it's kind of a way to pay for it without putting it on the backs of the taxpayer.
Okay.
We would delay projects, but.
Yeah. And what I wanted to say, you alluded to, any citizen can go in and do a survey on where they think that money should go, be reinvested, use some of it for investment. And I encourage people to go on, if it's still open, for the city's website.
I think it's closed now.
Okay. City of Kawartha Lakes they have a $3 million shortfall. They found $3 million surplus, so it's a wash. So it looks like the city of Peterborough is working on something like that. So there is a potential we could see no impact, but use money that taxpayers have invested previously. Is that?
That's correct. Well, that's kind of my thought, is that if we use those reserves, it would delay the projects that they're kind of earmarked for, right? But we would just top it up with the proceeds or the investment.
Okay. Well, what I'm going to suggest, just as a citizen, I see the downtown police satellite offices opening at the bus station. That was approved.
That's a good thing.
It was approved in 2012. We don't need any more delays. There's just my editorial. Keith, I want to end with you. We just have just over a minute left. This is something happening in East City, Ashburnham, East City Public School. Keith, are you happy with that name? Should it be Land of Shining Waters School? East City Public School says it like it is. It could be the Keith Riel Public School. But
I believe that was in the running. Riel Elementary.
I put that in. I'm not going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. We have elected people on the Board of Education, and certainly it's in their bailiwick, whether I like the name or not. It's their job to do that. So I'm just saying it's going to be a great school when it gets built, regardless of the name.
Well, Keith, you know, it's a great location. New schools mean our community is growing. We've got new families in the region. Great location on Armour Hill. You've got a view of the city, so kids can, you know, look out the window when they don't want to pay attention to classrooms. And the best part is keeping the old King George School, the sister school to Queen Mary across the river. I want to thank you both for joining us today on one of the nicest summer days in the spring we've had. We wish you all the best going forward. City Council, all our viewers I know are anxious to get life back to what we like to enjoy in the community. This will be our last official show. We're wrapping up towards the end of May here. We may come back on if there's a pressing issue. Maybe we'll do a special on seniors long-term care, Keith, and get you lined up.
Love to be here, I can tell you.
Maybe we'll get the premier on. I was on a session last night. He had a town hall, and that was the topic, of course, of great interest to everybody. I want to thank Mary, our producer, David Feely, our manager, all the volunteers that helped us to get up to the point where we weren't in the studio. I hope you're all doing well. And most importantly, I want to thank our viewers. I don't have a viewer of the week. Anybody that's watching us is a viewer of the week in my heart and our team's heart. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time on Politically Speaking.